Hello geographers, welcome to a series of lessons which have been recorded for you to help you complete your exam. These lessons run alongside a series of work booklets, and these will help you prepare for the questions that we might get. Some of the notes have been completed for you and diagrams included to help with your exam preparation. Where you're expected to make notes or complete a task, the area will be boxed off, and this will help you to know where you need to write. The headings in the booklets match the PowerPoint, so it's easy for you to know which pages match up, but I'll do my best to tell you what pages we're using anyway. The BBC Bite Size website is really useful. Remember, we're studying OCRB and also the CGP OCR revision guide. I should state that I don't own the rights to any of the images or any of the diagrams I've used in these presentations or in your work booklet. I've used QR codes throughout the presentations, which will take you to videos on YouTube. I've also tried to include the links as well. In this lesson, we will be continuing to look at how the UK's population is changing. We're going to focus specifically on Birmingham in this lesson. This is a really important lesson because it also links to our urban futures topic, where Birmingham is our AC city case study. So we'll be summarising how the population structure and ethnic diversity of Birmingham has changed since 2001. In today's lesson, we will be studying how Birmingham's population and ethnicity has changed since 2001. Our case study is going to be Birmingham, so therefore we can expect a 6-mark or even an 8-mark exam question on this. And we're going to be describing how the population has changed over time. Turn to page 13. How has the population structure of Birmingham changed over time? This is a line graph. The data is linear, which means that a line graph is appropriate. Along the x-axis, we've got years 2001 to 2041, and then along the y-axis, we've got population. Figure 4 shows a time series of population estimates and 2018 projections. The chart shows rapid growth from the start of the millennium to a slower growth in more recent years. Also includes a decline in population between 2019 and 2020. This can be attributed to COVID. The population is expected to increase again after 2022. Pause the presentation for a few minutes and copy the 4 bullet points into your workbook, please. This slide shows a summary of information about Birmingham's population using the 2011 census. It showed that Birmingham is the largest local authority district and is home to around 20% of the residents in the West Midlands. It showed that 1 in 5 people living in Sutton Coldfield were pensioners. For all areas, the greatest proportion of pensioners were found among the white Irish ethnic group. This was followed by white British in all but 10 areas, where the proportion of Black Caribbean or Indian were greater. The overall size of the city's population has increased by 9.8% between 2001 and 2011, an increase of 96,000. Between 2001 and 2011, the number of people of working age has increased by 13.9%. This compares with 6.2% for the West Midlands and 9.2% for England. Around 230,000 of Birmingham's residents were born overseas. Of these, 44% have been a resident in the UK for less than 10 years. Countries new to the 20 most reported countries of birth for Birmingham residents since 2001 include Iran, Zimbabwe, Philippines and Romania. Pause the presentation for a few minutes. Choose at least 3 to 5 bullet points that you think you can remember and write these in your booklet. This slide shows population estimates using 2020 data. Mid-2020 population estimates from the UK Office of National Statistics estimates that Birmingham's resident population was about 1.1 million in 2020. This is a decrease of 7.5% since 2010. This is the first year-on-year decrease following a rapid population growth since the start of the millennium. Decreasing fertility rates, changes to international migration policies and increased mortality rates have contributed to the more than modest growth in recent years. Deaths were up 16% in 2020 compared to the average in the previous 5 years. The size of the older population and excess winter deaths affect mortality rates. In addition, these estimates were influenced by the first wave of COVID-19, and there were 4,260 deaths registered between March and June in 2020, and almost 30% stated COVID-19 as the main cause of death. Pause the presentation for a few minutes and make a note of at least 3 bullet points in the box. This slide shows a population pyramid for Birmingham. Along the y-axis, as usual when we look at a population pyramid, we have age groups. Along the bottom, we've got percentage of total population. We've got males and females. So the pink shows England and the line shows Birmingham. This population pyramid shows a comparison between England and Birmingham. It shows that Birmingham has a youthful population. This means that Birmingham has a greater proportion of children and young adults compared to the national average. The population pyramid shows the proportion of pensioners in Birmingham, 13.1%, is lower than England's averages of 18.5%. Pause the presentation for a few minutes and copy these 3 sentences into the box. We're now going to use the population data taken from the 2011 census. So we need to be using page 14, and then we're going to summarise how Birmingham's age structure has changed. So looking at the data, I can see that Birmingham has a relatively young age structure compared with the rest of the region and the rest of England, with on average more children and fewer pensioners. Table 1 compares broad age groups, so child, working age groups and pensioners. It also includes a comparison with the West Midlands region, so on this table it's WMR, West Midlands region. Using this table, I can see that Birmingham's age profile is also younger than the region, having a greater proportion of children, 22.5% compared with 19.6% in the region and 19.2% in England. I can also see that proportion of pensioners in Birmingham, 13.1%, is over 5% lower than the regional average of 18.7% and England averages of 18.5%. So in our booklets now, we're going to describe how the age structure of Birmingham has changed. We're going to complete a paragraph in our booklets using the data from these 2 tables that I've just talked about. Pause the presentation for a few minutes whilst you have a go at describing the age structure of Birmingham between 2011 and 2020. Using the 2 tables, your answer could look something like this. The age structure of Birmingham has changed slightly between each census. In 2011, there was approximately 22% under the age of 16 and 13% over the age of 65. We call these people dependents because they are dependent on the working population. The working population made up 64% of Birmingham's population. In 2020, there was approximately 22.5% of people under the age of 16 and 13% over the age of 65. This shows there has been little change between the age groups in 10 years. Pause the presentation for a few minutes whilst you copy down this answer onto page 14 of your workbook. Turn to page 15. How does migration and natural change affect Birmingham's population? So figure 8 shows the components of population change in Birmingham between 2010 and 2020. The pink shows natural change, which is birth rates being higher than death rates, and the blue shows overall migration. The line shows population change. Between 2012 and 2016, natural change and international migration added to the population. Since 2016, more people moved away from Birmingham than migrated inwards from elsewhere in the UK. This continued a long-standing trend of outmigration and reduced Birmingham's population. Pause the presentation for a few minutes and copy down the 3 bullet points on page 15, please. Census data shows that Birmingham is a diverse city. Most people in Birmingham belong to the white ethnic group, making up 58%, with the majority of these belonging to the white British group, 53%. Other large groups include Pakistani, making up 13.5% of Birmingham's population, and Indian, making up 6% of Birmingham's population. The main languages after English spoken in Birmingham are Urdu, Punjabi and Bengali, which are South Asian languages. 46% of Birmingham residents said that they were Christian. This is a decrease of 13% from the 2001 census. This downward trend was also reflected regionally and nationally. In contrast, people who said they were Muslim increased by 7.5% in Birmingham from 2001. The proportion of people saying they had no religion increased by 6.9% between 2001 and 2011. Pause the presentation for a few minutes, choose 3 to 5 bullet points and write them in the box that says diversity. Choose the bullet points that you think you are going to remember the easiest. The choropleth map on this slide shows distribution of migrants in Birmingham who have lived in Birmingham for less than 10 years. The blue on the PowerPoint slide shows the Birmingham Ring Road, which goes around the city centre. The darkest green shows where there is above average number of migrants compared to the city average, and the yellow shows a below average number compared to the city average. Data shows that just over 200,000 of Birmingham's residents were born overseas. Of these, 44% have been a resident of the UK for less than 10 years. The map shows that the majority of migrants who have lived in Birmingham less than 10 years live in areas close to the city centre, known as the inner city. The highest concentration of new migrants were found in Ladywood, Nechells and Soho. All of these places can be found in the inner city close to the city centre. Pause the presentation for a few minutes and copy down these 3 bullet points. Turn to page 16. This choropleth map shows diversity in Birmingham using 2013 data where migrants have lived in the UK more than 10 years. Again, the blue on the PowerPoint shows Birmingham Ring Road, the darkest green shows above city average and the yellow is below city average. The map shows that longer established migrants were more likely to live in Lozells and East Handsworth, Spark Brook and Handsworth Wood wards. More established migrants were twice as likely to live in Sutton Coldfield compared with new migrants. More settled migrants were less likely to live in Longbridge, Shard End or Northfield compared to recent migrants. Pause the presentation for a few minutes and make a note of these 2 bullet points. We're now going to use these 2 choropleth maps to describe the distribution of ethnic minorities in Birmingham. We're going to complete our answer in our workbook. Your answer could look something like this. Approximately 230,000 of Birmingham's residents were born overseas. Around 45% have been resident in the UK for less than 10 years. 55% of migrants have lived in the UK more than 10 years. The majority of migrants who have lived in Birmingham less than 10 years live in areas close to the city centre, near the inner city in areas such as Ladywood and Nechells. Migrants who have lived in the UK more than 10 years were more likely to live in areas further out, such as Lozells and Handsworth, which are further away from the city centre. Migrants who have lived in the UK for more than 10 years were more likely to live on the outskirts of the city, e.g. in places like Sutton Coldfield in the suburbs, than people who have recently migrated. Pause the presentation for a few minutes and make sure your answer looks something like mine. Just before we move on to our final exam question, I'm just going to summarise what we've learnt in this lesson. So population increased in Birmingham between 2001 and 2019, however now it's starting to decrease. Population structure has remained roughly the same, with approximately 23% of people being under the age of 16 and approximately 13% being over the age of 65. The ethnic diversity of Birmingham has changed slightly. Migration increased between 2001 and 2017, but has now started to decrease, possibly as a result of Brexit. Approximately 230,000 of Birmingham's residents are migrants. 55% have lived in Birmingham more than 10 years, and 45% have lived in Birmingham for less than 10 years. The country of birth has changed very little between 2001 and 2011, with the main sources of migrants coming from Pakistan, India and Ireland. Migrants living in Birmingham less than 10 years mostly live close to the city centre, in the inner city in places such as Ladywood and Nechells. Migrants who have lived in Birmingham more than 10 years have moved further out to places such as Lozells and Handsworth. Lower number of migrants live in the suburbs such as Sutton Coldfield, but those that do are more likely to be established migrants. We're now going to attempt an exam question. This is an example of an exam question that we might see. For your named UK place, describe how the population structure and ethnic diversity has changed. So our named UK place is Birmingham. When we are talking about ethnic diversity, we're talking about migration and ethnic groups. When we talk about population structure, we're talking about number of people and age groups. This question could also be linked to the character of the city, in which you would also write about the influence of migration on changing cultural diversity, e.g. shops, takeaways, religious buildings and so on. And we'll talk about this in our Urban Futures unit. Pause the presentation for a few minutes and have a go at this 6-mark question. 6-mark questions should roughly take you around 8 minutes to complete. On this slide is an example answer. Feel free to use this answer to either improve yours, or if you were struggling with that question, make a copy of my answer. So this is what your answer could look like. Between 2001 and 2017, there was a growth in Birmingham's population. After 2017, the population started to decline. The age structure of Birmingham has changed only slightly between each census. In 2011, there was approximately 22% of people under the age of 16 and 13% over the age of 65. The working population made up 64% of Birmingham's population. In 2020, there was approximately 22.5% of people under 16 and 13% over 65. This shows there has been little change between age groups in 10 years. Since early 2000, natural change and international migration has added to Birmingham's population, though from 2017 onwards, the migration has declined. More people are moving away from Birmingham than migrate towards it from elsewhere in the UK, continuing a long-standing trend of out-migration. Overseas migrants arriving between the 1950s and 1980s were mostly from southern India and the Caribbean. More recent trends see people arriving from many different parts of the world, including Eastern Europe, Africa and the Middle East. The majority of migrants who have lived in Birmingham less than 10 years live in areas close to the city centre, in the inner city in areas such as Ladywood and Nechells. Migrants who have lived in the UK more than 10 years were more likely to live in areas further out, such as Lozells and Handsworth, which are further away from the city centre. The majority of migrants come from South Asia, especially India and Pakistan. Pause the presentation for a few minutes whilst you make a copy of that answer in your booklet. So just a final recap about what we were learning in this lesson. So we were talking again about how the UK's population is changing. We have summarised how the population structure and ethnic diversity of Birmingham has changed since 2001. Don't forget, this is an important lesson because it also links to our Urban Futures topic.